Right. Well, hi everyone. So my name is Taylor. I'm going to be running this workshop today on machine-actionable data management plans and why you'd want them in the repository. So we're going to be using Mentimeter for some interaction today. I think we've just posted that in the chat. So while you're all getting that set up, I'm just going to pass over to my colleague Richard. I'm just going to say a little bit more about Cayuse, our organisation.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Richard Forrest. So just before we get kick started, and I'll hand back to Taylor, just wanted to explain a little bit about Cayuse and why we're employing developers in the free sort of open source repository. So Cayuse has been working with research institutions for over 25 years and recently acquired Haplo and their open source solutions to add applications for researchers to their suite. If you skip to the next slide for me. And again, we're not going to go into detail, so please don't worry about that. So Cayuse Suite overall delivers all aspects of research administration. And now really with the addition of Haplo Repository, we're really delivering that final stage of publishing to the research on the web, connecting to the wider Scholar ecosystem. Do want to emphasize that we strongly believe in that research should be open, and particularly that repository software should act in the best interest of researchers and institutions, and so must be open source without any lock-in. And we're really proud at Cayuse to be investing in that and offer the open source software to the community. And it's certainly something that Taylor and I and the rest of the organisation are very, very strongly supporting and behind. With that, I'm going to hand back to Taylor. Just a little bit of a plug. We will be using Mentimeter. So if you go to mentee.com and use the code 46125846, which is in the chat, you'll be able to interact a little bit, and we'll use that as we go through the session. But again, please do keep it interactive. If you've got any questions in the chat, I'll monitor those, and I'll let Taylor know as we go. But thank you very much.
Great. All right. Well, first up, yeah, we're gonna skip into Mentee here just to get to know the audience a little bit more. So if we look over into here, see people have already been filling in. It's great. Very European crowd. I suppose it makes sense with the time difference. So give these a couple of minutes for each of these sort of Mentee interactions here. South America as well. That's great. Okie dokes. Right, let's hope this works. I think if we just click onto the next one. Oh, both still coming in. Hold up. Got 23 responses, 33 participants. Let's give this a couple more minutes actually. All right. Ooh, there we go. So what does your organisation do? I've tried to sort of give a bit of a spread here, but I feel like we might end up with quite a few in the other category. Or not. No worries. So we've got a few other repository service providers in the audience as well. It's good to know. Quite excited to see the demonstration later. I think we've got a few more of these. If we go through on to, I think the next one is your sort of role within your organisation there. Yeah. I always enjoyed Mentee. Yeah, the little animations have always found it really fun.
They're quite neat, aren't they? I am looking forward to a little bit of a plug for the sort of the sessions towards the end of the day. There's a neat tool that the conference is using to allow you to come in to talk to the different people. As if you were in a conference and gather around and have conversations, and if you get close to each other, you can have a conversation. It's something that we've not been able to do in a physical sense, but certainly something we can do virtually.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've not seen anything like that platform. It's quite interesting, to be fair.
It is, yeah. Look forward to seeing people on it. Got a good spread across on quite a few of these questions. It's nice to see.
Well, that makes me think I'm asking the right questions.
Yeah.
Right, and then just the last one, I'm just going to sort of, what is your, coming in? What is your interest in machine-actionable data management plans? Just a nice little free text one. You should all sort of just start scrolling on through the screen here. So just a few words, what you're here to gain. Sure, incorporating functionality, performance, automation. Doing research on the top of your university. Oh, that's quite cool. Connecting projects, ingesting end-to-end research. Closing the circle, I like that phrase.
For the person doing research, do feel free to reach out to us post if there's anything we can do to help. But anyone, if you got sort of follow-up questions for Taylor and I, probably more Taylor as he's got the detail, then our contact details will be available through the conference at the end. But yeah, thank you so much for your interaction here. Some really good stuff.
Really good stuff. Don't keep that. Don't close the mentee share there. We'll be back to that a little bit later on. If we switch back to the slides and start getting into the actual content. So I'm going to split this up into two halves. So the first of which is going to surround sort of motivation for storing my data management plans in the repository, how to represent that in a structured format, and how sort of standard features of any modern current research information system, CRIS system, and how that can be utilized by how those features can lend themselves to data management plans. Right, so first we're going to motivation, and it's going to be sort of policy compliance. So there are obviously a lot of benefits to making any research administration process machine actionable, whether that might be through like automation of the process, increased accountability or auditing, or the ability to guide researchers and staff through the process in a friendlier and more interactive way than possible on paper. Data management plans are no exception to that rule, and the first benefit is researcher compliance with these policies. So policies here I've broken down into three categories, though I'm sure there are many more. Regional being any rules or regulations that you may be bound to follow by your geographical location, so enforcing a minimum data retention period, or a specific level of open access, for example. Funder policies being rules or regulations that a specific funder might enforce on research data generated through one of their grants. And then institutional policies, any rule or regulation that a particular institution might enforce on research generated by their researchers or through projects led by their researchers. So these policies can be actively monitored and compliant and verified at each step of the research process. When you've got your data management plans in the repository or in your CRIS system, ensuring any data deposited into the repository meets the expectations around the data collected. For example, any sensitive data is restricted and potentially subject to anonymization before any access might be granted. Ensuring data is retained and preserved for the correct amount of time, potentially alerting administrative staff if it hasn't been deposited to the repository within a reasonable amount of time, which could indicate, for example, maybe the data has been left on a flash drive in a drawer somewhere rather than following the correct procedure, which obviously opens the institution up to a range of potential legal issues if any data were to go missing with significant amounts of personal and sensitive information on there. The next one is going to be just interoperability in general, the benefits there. So making anything machine actionable opens the door to interoperability and communication either within the same system or between external systems. So some of this interoperability will be demonstrated a bit later on, where we explore sort of the Haplo repository implementation. Just to briefly explain it here first, so you can preload the data into a DMP from any ethical or funding application stored within a system. That minimizes administrative burden and the risk of mistakes. Tracking the related data deposited into the repository allows for reporting on whether the data is meeting the criteria outlined within the DMP. For example, the amount or type of data, or whether sensitive data has been collected and subsequently restricted correctly. This reporting allows for a quick look overview of the system in comparison to the plans within it. So keeping this level of accurate information about the planned activities by researchers also benefits the CRIS system by allowing planning for storage and infrastructure. We'll touch on this again a little later on, but the knowledge that the repository can expect large amounts of data to be deposited soon can allow for any alterations to storage with, say, your repository provider that can be budgeted for and prepared in advance to suddenly your researcher trying to upload their huge data set, and there's just no space for it. So. Right, so we're going to flick back to Mentimeter quickly here, and then we're going to look at a couple of examples of sort of funder data management plan, their templates, their guidance for what they want. But we're going to flick back to Menti here. Ooh, I'm not sure if they've still been coming in there. And we're going to go with funder requests for DMPs are, and I think if I'm correct in thinking, you should have 3 options on the screen there, with being able to rate how far you agree or disagree with the statements that they are increasing, time consuming, and or repetitive. Yeah, I thought this graph might look a little something like this.
You should have had a 4th one of fun to do.
Yeah, this is sort of the response I was expecting, to be fair. I've seen an increase in sort of that focus on research data recently. I think that's probably about, well, I don't think the graph's going to drastically change with more and more input there. Right, and then the last one, the last bit of Menti for the day, it's going to be sort of free text, your pain points with data management plans. I've given you 3 of them there, time consuming, repetitive.
This will give us a bit of a word cloud to work from, won't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the only response we really need.
Interoperability, that's a good one.
Wrong templates, yeah. Standard structure, comparability, yeah. Lack of semantics, like that. I suppose the word clouds only really work when they're using the exact same words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good though.
I'm just really enjoying the animations, if I'm honest.
Yeah, Monday afternoon at 4:45 in the afternoon. It's in the UK at least.
Yeah, for sure. Updating, just slowly getting bigger and bigger in the middle.
Interoperability.
If only that was appeared. You're in luck. You are in luck. One responses.
Yeah, really appreciate the interactivity. I know we can't all talk together, but this is really good. Excellent.
Right. Switch back here. Right, yeah, so we're going to look at a couple of templates or sort of guidance outlines from some funders here. So we're going to go firstly for the Wellcome Trust, and then secondly from Cancer Research UK. And then we'll take a look at the RDA Common Standard for Machine-Actionable Data Management Plans. And I've prepared a nice Google sheet which just outlines the common questions between all three, and then start looking at the similarities between those. And then I've also got some form structuring prepared, which is quite nice and shiny. So if we first go into the Wellcome Trust here, this is welcome.org, there, how to complete an outputs data management plan, sorry. And they break it down, I think, down here into many sections, many sections. So your data and software outputs, materials, resources required, the IP that you'll generate and protect. So we have data and software, and these all come with massive amounts of guidance, which it's not the easiest to digest. This isn't too bad because it collapses down on the website, but you'll see the Cancer Research templates, just kind of a block of text. But yeah, so your data management plan needs to include things that like your research is going to generate, the data, sort of like a description of what you're trying to produce, any metadata, so the actual provide sufficient high quality metadata for another data set to be discovered. When you intend to share it, where it will be shared, how it will be accessible, which probably ties in a little bit with where you're going to share it, whether there's going to be any limits, potentially licenses, I suppose, embargoes, safeguarding the data, what material research will produce and how these will be available. It's just a lot of overlap with some of the sections here, or the sections anyway. Research, resources required, access, and any intellectual property that you're going to generate, or if you are going to generate it, how that will be protected, and obviously because it's the Wellcome Trust, how that's going to be used for health benefits. That's a big section on that as well. And if we move over into the Cancer Research UK Data Management Plan, or Data Management and Sharing Plan as they call it. This is just pulled straight from the Cancer Research UK website. Was a Word document to be filled in, but again, this is, I can't remember how many pages it is, 6 or so. Sort of a description of the data, so your type of study, what sort of data you're gonna produce, and you can start to see that the similarities between the two that are coming in, the format and the scale of the data, software used, number of records, going through the managing, storing and curating the data. So again, that ties into how it's going to be shared and stored and preserved long term. Preservation's down here as well. Any metadata standards and data documentation, which again ties in with the Wellcome Trust. There's just a lot of overlap with a lot of these, and I can imagine this becomes quite tedious as a researcher trying to complete all of these grant proposals, the data management plans for the proposals every time, and there's must be a better name. Please share here the link that you're showing. Yeah, for sure. I can't show the Cancer Research UK one, I'm afraid. That's a document straight off of that I've downloaded and converted to PDF. I can pop the Wellcome Trust up there. This is easily available on Google though, if you was to search Cancer Research UK Data Management Plan Template or something like that. But yeah, going through the risks to security, the mechanisms for sharing, discovery, if you have any exclusive restriction on that data, or how long you're going to have exclusive use for. Hopefully not too long, applying with fair principles there, but any restrictions or delays to sharing, milestones. It's all very long. With a lot of the fields match up to here. So if we nip across into my nice little sheet here, here we are. I hope you can all see that. Let me try and zoom in a little bit. Oh no, I'm not trying to open the insert menu. Actually, a little bit easier to see. So I've highlighted everything here in green across where as far as as I believe, the field or the question / response required in the funder specific plan lines up directly with the common standard from RDA. I do need to, I will post the link to the RDA Common Standard at the end. I've not got that to hand at the moment. That is available open source on GitHub as well, of course, for those of you not familiar with that. So we've got the data, the software output you're going to generate, types, data sets have types in this common standard. Format and scale can be handled by the distribution part, the distribution of within the common standard. Where your data and software is going to be made available, identifying data repositories entrusted. That can be your host in the distribution. There's the common standard, thank you, Agustina. Yep, so how your data and software will be accessible to others. These all just line up really nicely. Some of them won't be perfectly, so like any resources required, technical resource, that lines up very well. But any limits to data and software sharing, will external users be bound, the security and privacy part of the data set in the common standard. That's not going to match that perfectly every time, but it'll get you most of the way there in a way that's more editing rather than trying to generate this content from scratch every time you're trying to submit a funding proposal. And again, type of study, that could be the description of the project, things like that. They all line up quite closely. And even if they're not perfect, a small bit of editing is obviously way better and way less time consuming than generating this sort of content every single time. And then we've got our few sort of outliers that aren't included in the common standard, but some of them do still line up. So where you intend to share your data and software and any milestones for sharing, there's going to be a lot of overlap there. The metadata and annotating, documenting, describing the data. And then we've got these four each, which is quite for each of just unique questions for those specific funders. But again, I can see these being used in other places, so materials that are produced and how they'll be available, IP generated, health benefits is the only really unique one there. I can see these being needed in other places as well. Right, so we've gone through the funder templates, just skimmed through those and matched those questions up, the repetitive between them, the repetitive sides between them. So what we're going to do now is outline how I would go about structuring the form, the web form for covering these, what is this, eight or nine questions here that aren't included in the common standard. And we've done that with our shiny tool form builder here in my. So this is part of as used by our clients here, which is how we design and implement our forms. And you can see I've already filled this in with the questions here. But these are all intended to be really generic and can be used between multiple. There's nothing particularly that ties them to one funder. So like, when do you intend to share your data, and include any major milestones along the way? What metadata and documentation will be accompanied? Materials will be produced? How will the data set be publicized? How long will you retain exclusive use of the data, considering fair? And then any links to relevant policies outlining how restrictions and delays will be handled. And then specific section on IP, which could potentially be its own form, if you wanted to segregate that out a little bit more. So I'm aware I was kind of speeding through funder templates and structuring forms here. I haven't seen any questions pop up. Does anyone have any questions or anything they'd like to run through at the moment? Sure, well, I'll take that as a no. But again, just pop any questions in the chat as we go along, and we'll get to those. We'll get to those at the end. So we flip back to our slides here. Sorry. And the last part of the motivation is standard features of a CRIS or repository system lend themselves to data management plans or machine actionable data management plans really, really well. So some of these standard features you get in a CRIS system are version control, change tracking, and also role-based controls and permissions. So version control, firstly, there is a big shift at the moment towards viewing DMPs as a sort of a living document. So broadly speaking, the view at the moment, as I understand it, is that they are sort of something to get over and done with at the start of a project, and then they're left in a drawer until the research is done, and then they're compared with the research for compliance, and that's handled how it's handled. But really recently, we're talking a few weeks back now, DataSite announced their support for DMP IDs, which not only gives DMPs a persistent identifier, but also supports versioning of them. Well, versioning of the PIDs relating to a specific version. And that should help to align sort of opinions around their role as a living document, sort of the types and quantity of data collected, its sensitivity, the practices around storage, the methods for collecting. These could all change throughout the research process, and the DMP should reflect that. To provide additional information and to show how the research process might have been affected by factors unknown at the start of the project, and those sort of adjustments and versions can then be found, or the idea with the persistent identifier, they can be found by other people and other researchers and learned from and acted on as well. So change tracking is the next standard feature. So if we're moving towards treating them as a living document, DMPs, then we're going to be expecting for it to be updated throughout the research process. So with that comes a need to sort of track those changes, audit who's making them, and this is needed to support versioning within the DMPs, as well as to maintain accountability within the system for those changes. So it's not just anyone's making the changes, and we can't attribute who's generating new versions of the data management plan. Maybe it's just a co-investigators found something and tweaked something, but we don't know it's them, and there's some confusion going on there. So again, the change tracking and the auditing of that. And finally, role-based controls. So enforcing policy or hierarchy within the institution becomes simple with a modern repository or CRIS system. So for example, it might be that any researcher on a project is permitted to contribute towards the initial draft of a DMP. Then once it's been completed, perhaps only a data steward, say for the faculty or the institution as a whole, only a data steward would be permitted to make changes and then potentially mint a DMP ID from it with DataSite. These sort of nuanced changes for permissions are easily manageable within a modern system. And in that example, allows for really rapid collaboration between researchers right at the start in developing that initial plan. And then you maintain that change approval process for altering the plan once finished. And this will show this in a demonstration a little bit later with the Haplo Repository implementation. But these are achievable really quickly, really quick wins with moving DMPs into the repository. And with that, I think we're on to the second half. Yeah, I think we're doing okay for time as well, which is nice. Yeah, so the second half here is going to be a lot of the sort of the tangible benefits within an integrated research management system, or the example is going to be with the full suite of Haplo products with the CRIS system, with ethics and funding primarily being used. Yep, and our planned future functionality as well, taking a part of that. Right, so I think we're on to quick wins here. Yep, implementation, tangible benefits. So the first of these sort of tangible benefits are storage and infrastructure warnings. So obviously research where you're aiming for research data, that can result in some exceptionally sized data files, which need to be stored in a repository, or should be stored in a repository rather. Typically, repository providers will charge for a set amount of storage within a system, and once that limit's approached, the institution will need to extend their subscription with the provider. So knowing about the potential need for additional storage in advance of the research taking place allows for institutions to build this sort of expense into their budgeting. And also taking into account that the upload limit of browsers being just a couple of gigabytes, I think the majority is capped at 2. So knowing if a data set's going to exceed this allows for a sort of a path into the repository to be planned for and formalized, rather than your researcher attempting to upload their 150 gigabytes of genomic sequencing into the repository and then Chrome saying no. That's probably not a situation anyone wants to get into. Yeah, so knowing these situations in advance is definitely advantageous compared to potentially being taken by surprise. So I've spoken about the preloading of data from external systems or potentially other modules in a CRIS system. This is evident in our implementation. So the loading of information into a DMP is taken from the other modules available as part of the Haplo suite, namely the funding and ethics monitor. The availability of reporting on the state of the repositories improved almost instantly with data management plans. So you'll see in our demonstration in a moment the ability to report on the quantity of data sets related to a project in comparison to the data management plan, as well as whether a DMP suggests a project will produce large and sensitive data sets, large or sensitive rather, potentially both. And then finally, we'll jump ahead in the life cycle and actually create a data set that would have been produced as part of the project that our data management plan relates to. And we'll see the system produces a warning to the researcher about the sensitivity of the data in the data set to reduce the possibility of any data leakage or exposure before the data set even enters a mediated deposit process. Again, catching that compliance before it even reaches the administrators. Right, and with that, I think, we're going to look at our current implementation of MA DMPs and some of the benefits you can get really, really quickly. So I think this is this tab here. I'll zoom in a little bit. This is our This is the inside of a Haplo system with the full suite installed. So you can see we've got our PhD manager, ethics monitor, funding, repository, and for those of you in the UK, you'll be familiar with the ref. We have a module for that as well. And we are acting as Susie Davies at the University of Example here. Right, so you can see at the side I've got my projects. So this is one I prepared a little bit earlier. We've got a few examples here, but I think I've got one, Open Repositories, Machine-Actionable DMPs. This is my project. We've got a couple of things linked here. We've got a proposal and an ethics application that I filled out earlier. So if we go ahead and check out that ethics application, that's here. This is the third ethics application on this system, the O3, for this year anyway. That's linked to our project. So for this academic year, Dr. Jed Ross was my reviewer. Thankfully, he signed it off as not requiring approval, so we're all good there. So this is my ethics application completed. We've got a proposal. So this is, we've applied for some funding for this project. This is tracked within the system. Not actually submitted that for review yet. But again, I'm the principal investigator there, and institute, the research institute. If we go ahead and edit this, we can add some objectives for our research here. So we want to explore how machine-actionable data management in modern system. Yep, and we save that, and we've just got some objectives there for our proposal. Yep, so within the Haplo system, you go to your project here, you can find it as we've been from the home page, and we've got a nice little tab here for data management plan. And it's as simple as clicking add. And here we are, we're adding our data management plan. So this is entirely based on the RDA, the Common Standard for DMPs. As outlined in their system, you can add things to this, add things to the forms, to the structure that's being sent across, but it just might not be as like machine actionable if someone's not expecting it. It's not part of the actual schema, so we've used that a little bit here to add in warnings around the size of data and things like that. But again, so the plan title, it's got our description. This is all pre-filled as needed from the system. So our plan title is already filled in here. That's from the project. Description of our project, that's actually optional from the RDA standard. This plan is going to be in English, so it's the project. And then if we save and continue here, we get to our data sets. So at this stage, we're pre-research. We're looking at our data sets, what we're gonna produce. So we're gonna have a data set that's going to be our, say, participants list of from the conference. This is going to be all of our participants out with research. What type of data set is going to be? Say, I'm not sure if you can see the drop down there actually, but we've got a few types. We've got text, image, archive, audio, slideshow, spreadsheet, and video. So say this is going to be a video. We don't know the size of this data set. Probably, let's be realistic, 0 to 4 gigs, probably reasonable. And keywords to describe this data set. So participants. Struggling to spell now, right? This is going to contain personal data. It's going to be our faked participants list. And sensitive data, probably, yep. With the structured forms here, you can, e.g., we use file naming conventions. Data quality assurance, this is going to be vetted by Jim, whoever Jim is. And any preservation statement, this won't need to be preserved. And then we can add another and another and another, and we can fill those in. Potentially, this is just going to example data set 01. And the only things we really need here are our types of data. And no, this isn't going to have anything like that in. This is an example data set. Right, so that's our our data sets that we're planning to produce from our research here, just a list of participants. Obviously, that's not a real list. And then this example data set. So then if we move on to costs, you can see we get a nice warning here. And this is not a warning, sorry, a notice. And this is one of the things with machine actionable data management plans. You can either get the communication from within the same system or from external. So here we've got it pulling from pulling from our internal in our system. So we've got this proposal was linked there, the description, which isn't the same as the objectives. So that's why that's not pulled through there. And the value, if we was to have filled in we have a costing tool behind the funding module. If we was to have filled that in and filled in a lot of information about the funding of the project, that would have been pulled through there. But if we just say that's going to be 125,000 GBP there, and the description. Yep. Funding project is example. And then the last one is ethical issues, and we've got our ethics application in the system, so that's pulled through. There are ethics issues related to this, and the location of them is this. Well, the ethics application within the system. That's the link to the internal to the system. See there, Dev 682. And then the description, so there's personal information, yeah. And then we save and finish, and it's as easy as that. That's our data management plan. And then you can see our buttons here have now changed to edit and view. So we can view this here. This is our plan. We can skip to the sections as we need, costs, ethical issues, data sets, and overall there. If we was to go back, we can now edit this and say we wanted to add an example. Those of you in the developer world, that's sort of general placeholder text. And if we save and continue, and skip to the end and save and finish again. If we view there, we can show our changes, and you can see on the 7th of June, Susie Davies there updated that description. She added that in there, and then that's the same for any new version we were to produce. We'd get an addition or a subtraction if there was anything to change, and that's just one of those quick wins with a modern CRIS system and putting those in and making use of those functionalities. Sorry, our default implementation here doesn't do any fancy things with the role-based permissions. You just have to be a researcher on the project in order to be able to edit or view the data management plan there.
Couple of questions for you, Taylor. Does it write back to the external systems, and can you clone plans?
Right. So at the moment, our implementation is quite simple and straightforward. We don't at the moment interact with any external systems, so that is a little bit later on. That's one of our future development goals and plans. So we're working towards that, being able to import plans from I think it's DMP online, and then being able to export those back out as well. So I mean, the short answer is no, not at the moment, but yeah, it's coming. It's in the future. It's definitely a feature we want to get out as soon as possible. And can you clone plans? So no, not at the moment. There's no reason you wouldn't be able to. That would be quite some straightforward development work, and it would be very straightforward. So at the moment, our implementation, as I say, is quite simple and to the point, and very needs to be fleshed out a little bit potentially. But yeah, so cloning plans that's probably quite a good idea for the roadmap as well, to be fair. So yeah, right. Not sure how we're doing for time here. I think we've got about half an hour left. So if I just jump through, we're going to skip forward in research now. We've got our data management plan. We've edited it as we need. So we're going to go through as Susie now and deposit some research. Is there a reporting dashboard for admins? There is. That's a very good question. If I do, I'll show you that first, and then we'll deposit our research. Just need to impersonate someone that's allowed to see them. Mr. Marty Shepherd from my example university here. So we go through to our repository, and a little bit further down, we get a lot of data. Well, we have a lot by standard dashboards available, but DMP reports by project there. And you can see we've got all of our data management plans within the system. So the project they relate to, when the plan was created, last modified, whether you're expecting large files, sensitive data, whether the sensitive data has been secured, and sort of your expected versus actual stored data sets there. So you can see for the open repositories one here, this is created 7th, last modified the 7th. We're not expecting large files, we are sensitive. Currently it's secured because we've got nothing in the system, but that will change shortly, and I'll show you that as well. Where is license descriptions for data sets? That is not within the, I've just seen that pop up on the QA there. That's not within the data management plan. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's part of the distribution part of the RDA standard. That's not something that we've got in the data management plan at the moment. But that is something that can be handled. Probably could be clearer, but we'll go through that now. We'll go through how to do that now. So if I go back to impersonating Susie Davies, we've got our, we'll go through to my research outputs. And you can see we've got some example data sets and journal articles here. And we'll add an output in the system and data set. So we'll give this a data set, so we'll call this, say, the participants list. And the participants. Yes, I was looking forward to this question, Agustina. Yes, this is what we're on now. So we're at the moment we've done our research. We're going forward in the process, and we've got our outputs here, and we're depositing those into the repository. So if we skip down here, version of the dataset 1 and the project. So this is the project that we're linking it to. And we've got our data files here. So if I add my example spreadsheet and this license, we can give the file a license here. It should probably all rights reserved. And the data type is a spreadsheet. And we're not going to restrict this just yet. You can fill in all the other metadata, whether there's a review date, geographic location, and the bounding box. If you're familiar with the data site schema, that's a nice bit there. Right, and then we've got a title abstract, and we've linked to our project. So now, as soon as we save, we get redirected through to, is this data set in the project's data management plan? So it's possible to say, no, maybe this is linked to the project, but it wasn't in the plan, at which point then we can act on that. We can notify some sort of administrative user, potentially their, potentially your head of faculty should know that you're creating data sets that aren't linked to a DMP. That's obviously, if you're enforcing that as an institution, that'd be a great move to start with. But we do know this is in our data management plan. This is the participants list from the conference. So then that goes through there, and you can see we've got a nice big warning here. So the DMP for this project states that sensitive or personal data will be produced, but this data set has non-restricted files. So this is one of the things where researchers depositing data sets link them back to the DMP, because we said that our participants list was going to have personal data because it's a participants list. That should be restricted, and it's not enough within our system just to say that we're licensing it with all rights reserved or anything like that. You need to lock it down and actually restrict it to prevent anyone requesting access to those files. To nip back to the reporting quickly, while that's saying that we need to modify that, we go back to our repository editor, back to the project. You can see now our sensitive data is not secured. And obviously this is a big issue. well, it seems that my researchers in my example university here aren't very good at securing their data, but we'll go ahead and rectify that. So back to acting as Susie here. Oh, now on our projects. This is Susie's profile here. Research outputs, our participants list. If we was to edit that and restrict that file, that's a restricted file, no one's got access to that. And you can see our warning once this is loaded. Well, you can see our warning's gone away there, and we're compliant with our data management plan, and that's yeah, we're compliant with our data management plan, and that's the process. To touch back on the point about the distribution and the licensing, all of our records are treated as draft. So they're in the system, they're draft until they're deposited, and then they go through a whole mediated deposit process before joining the public repository or the publicly available items. So one way around, or one way to put the licenses in the distribution would be to add a research output. So we can add our data set as a draft item. So project open repository. So this is going to be a distribution of the planned data set. So we've got no files, but we're going to say that we're going to release that with a CC by, and there's going to be another data set that's going to be a CCO. And then if we just save that, you can say that's example data set 1, and that's going to be the distribution, and that's going to have the licenses, and that's going to be the description of that distribution of that data set within the project. So potentially we need to do some work to make that a little bit clearer and a little bit of a nicer way to do that within the system and to comply with the standard like that. But it is achievable within the system out of the box. And do we use ORCID in the description of authors is a question. Touching a little bit more on the actual repository software there. So we have, if we go through to here, we do allow linking with ORCID. There's the full integration with pulling of data and just the authentication to link all of the items to your work section on your ORCID profile. And that's then also publicly displayed on the repository as a sort of a business decision around that. But just to draw back to the data management plans, if you wanted to talk more about that later, feel free to drop me an email, or we can catch up in the networking sessions a little bit later on. But yeah, so that's sort of the demonstration of the system. As I said, it was mainly about quick wins and how just popping this functionality into your repository can really it doesn't take a lot to get it off the ground. It should be quite straightforward. And then just to touch on our future development plans here. So we want public landing pages for data management plans. We want minting of DMP IDs within our repository, and we want to work on external integrations. So public landing pages for DMPs. So we believe that the DMP should be considered very much a part of the research, as much a part of the research as the output of the data, as the output of the research itself. So as such, we believe that they should have public landing pages and should adhere to all the FAIR principles. So as I mentioned earlier, Dataset announced their support for DMP IDs, which are a form of DOI, especially for DMPs. So earlier this year, they announced that this is something we're looking to implement as soon as possible to improve the sort of accessibility and reuse of DMPs throughout the research ecosystem. And we're also looking towards external integrations, as mentioned earlier, both for sharing of DMPs stored within our repositories, but also for the ingestion of data into a DMP. So whether that be for a specific part of a DMP, like the preloading we saw earlier, or selecting a DMP as a template from an online tool, such as DMP Online. Those are things that we're looking to explore. We really want to work on soon. So I think we're just touching on sort of the hour mark after starting here. So I just want to open the floor up entirely for questions, if I'm honest. That's the sort of the content that I wanted to go through there. yeah, feel free to pop any questions out. I can see I've got one here. If an admin inserts a new author, how do you connect the author with ORCID? Again, this isn't especially relevant to the data management plans, but our authors are imported from a feed with the HR system, and then they authenticate themselves with ORCID. We don't allow manual entry to prevent issues and overlaps and the sort of compliance with ORCID. We are actually an ORCID approved service provider as well. But yeah, feel free to find me in the networking sessions, and we can talk more about. We can run through some demonstrations of other functionality if that's something that you're interested in. But yeah, so that's my email address up on the screen now. Feel free to drop me a message if you want, or drop me an email rather if you want to get in touch about anything. But yeah, that is machine actionable data management plans in the repository, motivation and implementation. I'd like to thank you all for your time. And yeah, if there's any questions, fire them across.
Thanks, Taylor. Yeah, and just reiterate, if anyone wants to chat with us, we'll be in the networking sessions on Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday. So good to see you there.
All right, so are we done?
I think we're all closed, yeah.
I think so.
Okay, Taylor, Richard, thank you. Thank you very much.